There's one word you never call a Latino, and that word is Latinx.
Hi, I'm Dr. C. I'm a professor of media studies and I'm also Latino, specifically Mexican American. And this video is a collection of arguments you often hear about why you should not use the term Latinx. So let's engage with them and include some evidence and some scholarship so that we can come to a more holistic understanding of the matter.
Most Latinos would rather you call them a racial slur than call them Latinx.
Citation needed.
You like eating beans. Yes, I do. They're very delicious. You work out in the farm a lot so your back gets all sweaty and wet. Thank you. That doesn't really feel like an insult, more like a compliment. You're a Latinx.
So here we have the term Latinx being framed as an insult that is more offensive than the racial slurs beaner and wetback, which is an interesting rhetorical choice. This creator's definition for the term beaner is mostly accurate, although we could fine-tune it a little bit. However, his definition for the term wetback is just wrong. That particular racial slur is a reference to the stereotype that Latin American immigrants enter into the United States without authorization by swimming across the Rio Grande, and in the process, their backs get wet. And this reinforces the ethno-nationalist idea that Latin American immigrants do not belong in the United States. Perhaps the most infamous use of this slur was the 1954 federal deportation program called Operation Wetback, wherein the U.S. government forcibly deported Mexican immigrants and Mexican American citizens from the United States back to Mexico across the river.
But why? Why do people hate being called Latinx? And this isn't just some contrival I'm saying. There's statistics out there that say anywhere between 1% to 3% of Latinos actually enjoy the word Latinx or will use it. Everyone else, the 97+% of us, we don't use the word ever.
So that 3% figure comes from a study that was published in 2020 by the Pew Research Center, and they surveyed Latinos and found that of those surveyed, 3% use the term Latinx. However, the idea that the other 97% don't like that term only works if you didn't read the rest of the study. The study found that only about 23% of those who had been surveyed had ever actually heard that term, and of those who had been surveyed, only about 12% actively disliked or did not agree with the use of that term. The rest of the people were either indifferent or thought it was a generally positive and inclusive term to use. But if you want more recent data, you could look at the study that was published by the Pew Research Center in 2024, where about 47% of those who had been surveyed had heard of the term Latinx. In that study, 4% of all who were surveyed, including those who did and did not know about the word, used it to describe themselves. And of those who were aware of the word, so the 47% I mentioned earlier, 75% did not think it should be used as an umbrella term for all Latinos, and about 23% did. Interestingly enough, of the people who knew about the term Latinx in that study, 36% thought it was a bad term to use, 12% thought it was a good term to use, and the other 52% didn't care either way. And by the way, if you want to make the argument that we should be using the term that is most preferred by those in the community, then we should be using the term Hispanic and not Latino, because Hispanic is preferred by 52% of respondents as opposed to 29% in favor of Latino.
The answer is actually really simple, but you first have to realize that Latinos born in the United States are not the same kind of Latinos born in Latin America. Words like Nuyorican, Puerto Ricans in New York, and Chicano, Mexicans in Los Angeles, were created in part because Puerto Rico and Mexico wanted nothing to do with us. In fact, they considered a lot of us to not be Puerto Rican and Mexican. If you weren't born in Puerto Rico, you're not Puerto Rican. If you weren't born in Mexico, you're not Mexican. You're born in Los Angeles, New York, you're American. You might have the heritage, but you're not one of us. No Sabo is a remnant of this. This is saying you look like us, but you don't speak our language, so you're not one of us.
Just as a point of clarification, the term Chicano applies to all Mexican Americans born in the United States who embrace a particular political philosophy and orientation rooted in the Chicano movement of the mid-20th century that is geared towards resisting white supremacy and liberation politics.
Latino and Latina are Spanish words, but Latinx is not. You wouldn't say Latinx in Spanish, you would say Latineques. Now, while we don't know who made up the word Latinx, a lot of people claim credit, it certainly wasn't someone who speaks Spanish.
Setting aside the fact that it is a little strange to say that we both do and don't know the kind of person who invented this word, there are multiple plausible explanations. For instance, it may have come from folks who speak both English and Spanish and just combined the two and came up with Latinx. It wouldn't be the first time that kind of thing has happened. There is also some evidence that it may have come out of Latin America. One of the stronger arguments is that it may have come from an academic journal on psychology out of Puerto Rico dealing with issues of gender.
It is an American word that bastardizes the Spanish language. It wasn't made by Latinos, and it is being forced upon them.
I don't think it's very accurate to say that it's being forced upon us when only about 4% of us use the term. And honestly, it kind of feels like when people cry about forced diversity whenever they see black or brown folk in movies.
What's more is the word Latino, while masculine, is a general term. A group of people, men and women, are Latino. It's like saying you guys. It doesn't always mean I'm referring to guys. If there's a room full of kids, men and women, I could say, hey, you guys, let's go.
But could you use the word Latinas in the same gender neutral way? Because I'm pretty sure in my experience that if I were to call my primos and tios Latinas to their face, they would not respond in a positive manner.
But what if I'm Latino and I'm non-binary? Well, like I said, Latino is a non-binary term, so you could still be Latino. But if that's not good enough for you, you could use Latine. But that is what you would refer to yourself as. You are Latine. Your people are still Latino.
To go back to what I stated earlier, a lot of them aren't even Latino. A lot of them are Hispanic instead.
But if I say Latino, Latino ends with an O, and that supports the patriarchy, and nobody cares. Mira, nobody cares. Latinos, we don't care. Latinos born in the United States do not care, and Latinos born in Latin America, they care even less.
Actually, there are a lot of people who care, such as Dr. Alan Pelaez Lopez, a non-binary Afro-Indigenous scholar from Oaxaca, Mexico. Lopez argues that part of the value of using Latinx is not just the inclusion of non-male and female genders, but also a reminder of the 4 wounds of colonization inflicted by the Spanish on the indigenous peoples of Latin America: settlement, anti-blackness, femicide, and inarticulation, that is, the stripping away of indigenous languages. And as far as folks on this side of the river go, we could talk about the Chicana feminist scholar Gloria Anzaldúa, who was not just concerned with modern-day patriarchy and machismo, but also in pre-colonization gender dynamics.
When companies and celebrities use the word Latinx, what Latino people see is that you are bastardizing and colonizing a language and culture you do not understand, and you definitely don't have Latino friends, because we would have told you, don't use Latinx. We tried to use Latinx, we agreed it didn't work, we agreed it was stupid, and we are not using it anymore. Let's move on.
I'm going to end this by saying 2 things. And the first is that, on a personal note, I'm a member of an organization called Latinx Ed. And it is an organization that was founded by and made almost entirely up of people with roots from Latin America. The sole mission of this organization is to invest in our Latina communities in North Carolina by increasing access to higher education and networking opportunities for professionals. And by the way, you don't have to believe in the concept of Latinx to join or benefit from it, just so we're clear that this is not being forced on anybody. And my second point is, Professor Charles Ramirez Berg, who is a scholar of how Mexicans and Mexico are depicted within American media, made the argument that machismo is a contract between a man and the state. The man's end of the bargain is to keep his household obedient and in line, and thus support the state through social order, and in return, the state supports the man in his authority. And so when I hear people say that you should not use the word Latinx, not that they just disagree with it or they don't like it, because that's whatever, that's personal opinion, that's fine, but that you should not use it as though it is a moral imperative, what I hear is that machismo reasserting itself to maintain a social order and quell any kind of deviation from the norm or any kind of rebellion that could lead to liberation for a group that feels oppressed under a patriarchal system. Because you see, that's what matters for me. Personally, I don't care about Latinx or Latine, Latinao, any of them. All right, none of those are really important to me. In 20 years, we could be using a different term. It's whatever. What I care about is the idea that we are grappling with these systems. What I care about is that we are challenging these ideologies and these concepts so that we can find a better way to express ourselves. The struggle is what matters to me. And when we say, you shouldn't do this, it's wrong, that kind of thing, what I hear is you're not willing to engage in that process.
And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a thing or two. Comment your opinions about the word Latinx down below and be civil, please. And tune in next time. We are going to talk about Afro-Latino and how people in the United States use it, and people in Latin America, they not only do not use it, they think it's really, really offensive and racist. Have a magical day, everyone.
Happy Latinx Heritage Month.